Our first storyteller is a sustainability teacher. Her name is Paula Gossage, and we don't really need to talk about Gossage and any relations that she might have, because that would distract from her story, and I don't want to give it away. Anyway, Paula's her own person. Let's move on from that. Paula.
Oh my goodness. Hi everybody. Well, I was born and raised in Colorado Springs and was the youngest of 6 children. And I was in 3rd grade when my older sister Lavon, went to prison. And it was so devastating for our family. And I remember the next day after she was busted, what happened was she fell in love with this handsome young med student, and they got hooked on drugs. And so she broke into a doctor's office or something and stole morphine and got caught. And so the day after she was busted, I remember seeing in the Gazette this picture of her. It was on the front page of the paper, and it was this horrible mugshot. And I was so stunned because this was not my sister. I saw her as this beautiful person who was kind and generous and loving and taught me all about nature and art and music and dancing. And so anyway, she was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison, and she served a year's sentence. And I remember the first time we went to Canyon City to visit her. We drove down to Canyon City, our whole family, and we walked in, and it was just this cold, dank place, concrete and steel. And I remember walking down the corridors, and being searched and all of this. And I remember walking down the corridors, and all these gates are slamming behind us. And then we walked into this big room, and we were waiting for my sister Lavon to come out. And she comes out, and she had this beautiful smile on her face, and she just lit up this room. And I was so stunned that this beautiful person was in this cold place. And so anyway, we sat down, and she sat in this big chair, and I sat on her lap, and we just had a great time talking. And then we had to leave, and I felt so bad leaving her there. But anyway, as I grew up, I found myself with my own addiction and my own prison, and that was alcohol. And it was really, I got married. I married my drinking buddy, and we had so much fun. And then all of a sudden, my partying kind of took over, and kind of turned on me, I would say. And I didn't like who I was becoming, and thank goodness I had my sister, because I was able to see the progression of what was going on. And during that time, my husband and I, at the time, we had the great privilege of managing a ranch. My brother had purchased a ranch. It was a 42,000-acre ranch between Canyon City and Salida. And he asked us to manage it, and we jumped at the chance. And during that time, well, when we got to the ranch, it was just in horrible shape. It was degraded, and there were grasses that were dead, and it had been used and abused, and so we started doing this this ranch program called Holistic Resource Management, and it was new back then. And we, it was this progressive new thing that we were trying, and the beautiful thing was all these grasses were growing. What it was, we were running cattle, sort of like the bison and wild animals had run previously. And what we saw over the years was this beautiful thing happening. Grasses were coming in that old-timers hadn't remembered were there, and water was, springs were welling up where there hadn't been water before, and there were willows coming up where Bureau of Land Management had tried to plant these willows every year, and every year they would die. And so, we just changed a few things. And during that time, you know, I was growing too. I had quit drinking, and I had just opened up to this land, this beautiful land, and I was seeing it thriving, and I was thriving, and it was just this amazing thing, and I was listening to my intuition and just going with it and flowing. There was this beautiful flow. It felt like between me and this beautiful place. And unfortunately, my marriage didn't work out. After 13 years, we were divorced, but we both stayed on the ranch. He had a place and I had a place there. It was big enough we could do that. And so this one day, I was dating this one guy this one summer, and I had to go to Fairplay to do some business, ranch business, and so we drove to Fairplay, and on the way back, my boyfriend and I drove to Fairplay, and on the way back, I said, let's take this back road through the Terrials. And so we took this back road, and there on this, as we're driving, there on the side of the road was this huge golden eagle. And as we approached, this eagle just spread its beautiful wings and flew off. And so I pulled over and I said, let's go see if he left us a feather. I know that's illegal, but but anyway, so we ran up this hill, and we get to the top of the hill, and no feather, no eagle. But we sat down, and it was such a beautiful day, and all of a sudden this eagle comes and flies, and my boyfriend's sitting down below, and I'm sitting on top of the mountain. And this eagle flies by and flies over his head once, and over his head twice, and on the third time just hovers. And he was just eye level with me. And then pretty soon there were 2 eagles, and then 3, and then 4, and they were just doing this dance and flying all around us and just like blessing us. And then they'd fly into the air until they were just tiny little dots. And then pretty soon there weren't any more eagles coming back. And so we decided to leave. We got in the car, and I looked at the time, and it had been, we thought we'd been there like 20 minutes. We'd been there 2.5 hours. But we were just in this eagle energy, and it was wonderful. So we get in the car, and we drive off, and we round this curve in the road, and there in front of us are these eagles flying in a circle. They're flying in a clockwise circle. And I stopped the car, and we got out, and they just flew over us. There were 7 of them. And they were just flying in this perfect circle, and then they just flew off into all directions. And so let's see. Okay, so then we had this Native American friend, and he told us that 7 was a very sacred number, and that it represented the medicine wheel, and that the medicine wheel stood for wholeness, and told us to figure it out for ourselves. And so what we figured was that we were just, you know, doing our healing work and you know, letting go of the past and moving forward. And if we figured if we continued that, we would, you know, fly to higher heights. And so then a couple of years later, I had the good fortune to go to the San Juans to a ceremony that a Peruvian medicine man was doing. And that night after the ceremony, I went to bed. This friend of mine and I were camping out, and I had this dream. And I dreamed that there was this drum beat going. It was just beating, beating, beating. And I was saying, Lavon, wake up. Lavon, wake up. And that was my sister who had been in prison before. And, and in my dream, my friend and I and my sister were bald eagles. And we were flying through the trees in the San Juans. And the next day, we were driving out of the San Juans, and we took this back road, and there were 3 bald eagles flying. And it was so incredible. And so then I told my sister about it, and she was so thrilled, you know, and so honored to be part of that dream. And so a couple of years later, she was diagnosed with lung cancer. And she was, you know, very sick and in and out of consciousness. And this one day she was fully conscious, and she woke up and she looks at me and she says, Paula, you know who I am. And I think that what she meant by that is, you know, that I truly, you know, I always thought of her as that person with that big smile and that big heart. And then she passed away, and I just felt like she was flying with those eagles. And I guess the lesson in this for me was that, you know, we all have these seeds within us, and that, you know, whether it's people or land or whatever, and if we nurture those, if we truly nurture them and give them care, give these seeds this care, we can truly soar with the eagles.